For Poland, the 19th century was a century of struggle for independence, and thus a century which for Poles did not end until the 11th of November 1918, when a new, independent Poland emerged from the ashes of the First World War. This is the story of how the 1905 revolution led, as those of 1830 and 1863 had not, to independence, and of the emergence of Józef Pilsudski as the leader of a reborn Poland. For Poland, the 19th century was a century of struggle for independence, and thus a century which for Poles did not end until the 11th of November 1918, when a new, independent Poland emerged from the ashes of the First World War. This is the story of how the 1905 revolution led, as those of 1830 and 1863 had not, to independence, and of the emergence of Józef Pilsudski as the leader of a reborn Poland. Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. And we're continuing our series of looking at all things rebellious and revolutionary. We started with the 1830 revolution in Poland, the uprising. We then went on to the 1863 uprising. And now we're going to start with the 1905 revolution in Russia, which led on to a series of events, ultimately, at the end of the First World War, seeing the re-emergence of Poland as an independent country. And I'm joined in the studio by our resident expert, Dominik Szczęsny-Kostanecki. Dominik, welcome.
Position of the Russian worker was much worse, even I would say, than that described by Dickens in Hard Times, in England back in the day.
Yes.
Besides, this is, over half a century later. So there are no social rights, this kind of social rights that would help anyhow the workers. So as a result, the rebellion, or a series of rebellions and strikes in different places, is very, very strong.
Because I think it's right to say, isn't it, also the peasantry who had received, under previous reforms, received some of their land, were also frustrated because although they had the land, they couldn't mortgage it, they couldn't sell it, they couldn't do as much with it.
Besides, they were forced to live in, it's either called obsztyna or mir, meaning a community that they couldn't leave. They couldn't leave to whatever they pleased, for example, live in cities, without the exception of the Bolshak, so the leader of this community. They from one type of slavery they fell into another. This time it wasn't the official, but the leader of this community that wouldn't accept people to leave.
But of course, so the revolution in Russia ultimately in 1906, I think, led to a new constitution, which established the Duma, or the parliament, some form of very limited constitutional monarchy, but also, of course, given that Warsaw was at that time probably the third largest and most western of the, if you like, the Russian empires.
No, maybe not the third, maybe the fourth or the fifth.
But anyway,
Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kiev was greater. That's for sure. That's for sure.
But certainly a major city. So
a major city.
The revolutionary fervour which gripped Russia inevitably spread to Poland.
And here we've got this difference, because in Russia it's a revolution. In Poland we say that it's both a revolution and an uprising. Sometimes it's called. Sometimes we say that it's somewhere in between the fourth Polish 19th century uprising. Remember Kościuszkowskie, November uprising, January uprising. So that would be the fourth major, because there was one in 1848, but that was a washout. In 1846, that was a washout, let's say. In 1848, so the Spring of Nations, we don't call it, we don't count it, strangely enough, we don't count it as an uprising. So the fourth or the first Polish Revolution. In fact, you've got both elements there. So there is no one political party involved in the 1905 revolution.
Exactly, and it's worth saying, because we sort of, the last major revolution or rebellion, uprising, call it what you will, we focused on, was in 1863. And what had been happening in Poland between 1863 and 1905, which sort of prepared the ground for the revolutionary spirit from Russia to be able to spread and take off in Poland the way it did? Would you say?
1864, so the collapse of the Rising, marks symbolically the end of Polish Romanticism. And after that, in the second half of the 60s, in the 70s, and in the 80s, that's the era of positivism. So the main idea is no longer to fight, with arms against the free partitioning powers, but to do what was called organic work. So that we have to raise the education, so that we have to prevent peasants from drinking alcohol, of course. So that we have to organize ourselves into society so that we protect our interests, and so on and so on. So this kind of work that you do in a peacetime. And that preparation, combined with the Romantic tradition, gave a massive, mass movement in 1905. But that was as much as 1905 was a rehearsal for the Bolsheviks, 1905 was a rehearsal for Piłsudski and his independentist movement before the First World War. So in fact, this independentist wing or independentist seed inside the 1905 revolution prevailed with time. But coming back, because I raised too many questions, good. But let's get back to your initial point, which was?
The conditions that have been created in Poland with the revolution of 1905 in Russia spread so readily to the Polish territories, which were part then of the Russian Empire.
Mm-hmm. So first thing is that we have, let's say, 3 or 4 different attitudes, let's say, towards the types of attitude towards the events in Russia.
I think, and also this is, I don't want to keep interrupting, but this is when we first see the emergence of Piłsudski as well as a figure, isn't it, around about this time?
As a man of action.